This is Chapter 7, Recording 2. We're talking about neonates and infants at this point. In order for neonates and infants to communicate, they basically cry. And if you listen to moms, they actually can guess what their infant needs based on the type of cry that the infant is doing. Infants develop relationships with their parents, and that's called bonding. This is the formation of those close personal relationships, and that's based on secure attachment, meaning that the infant knows that its needs are going to be met when it cries for their caregiver. Sorry. There we go. Anxious-avoidant attachment is found in infants that are repeatedly ignored by their parents. They show very little emotional response to their parents and treat them just the same as any stranger. Most infants have huge separation anxiety. They don't like to be away from mom or dad, and anybody that they're not used to can give them some anxiety. Trust and mistrust, this is a specific stage in an infant's life. It goes from birth to about 18 months. When the infant's needs are being met, they have a area of trust. They know that things are going to go okay. If their environment is not perceived as secure, then they transition over into mistrust. Toddlers are age 1 to 3 years. Their pulse rate is normally 90 to 150. Respiratory rate 20 to 30. Systolic blood pressure is 80 to 100, so looking much better. That would be like an adult in shock. Their temperature ranges pretty significantly, so they're anywhere from 96.8 up to 99.6. So some of those toddlers just run a little bit warmer than normal. That's why we tell parents, unless they have a temp over 100, they don't have a fever. And even at 100, it's a pretty mild fever at that. Their lungs continue to grow, mature, develop more bronchioles and alveoli so that their oxygen needs will be met. They're growing so fast and they tend to move around so much that they need that extra oxygen. Preschoolers are age 3 up to 6 years. Pulse rate is 80 to 140, so pretty close to that of those toddlers. Respiratory rate is 20 to 25 breaths per minute, so continuing to come down. Systolic blood pressure is the same as that 80 to 100. Their weight gain tends to balance out at this point. They don't get a lot of weight. They have kind of growth spurts more so than they do significant weight gain day after day after day. Their lungs continue to develop, but they're not well developed with their respiratory musculature. This prevents them from sustaining deep or rapid respirations for an extended period of time. Kids tend to go and go and go, and then they have to sit for a second and catch their breath. And then they go and go and go. It's kind of a funny thing to watch. Passive immunity. This is what they got from mom, that natural immunity. They don't have this anymore. Toddlers, preschoolers acquire immunity as they're exposed. You can't get immunity unless you're exposed to something. Those that are in care centers tend to have a little bit better immunity, and that's as a generalization, not everybody, because they get exposed to so much more. Daycare centers are basically a petri dish for every sort of bacteria and virus that is known. And obviously that's not legitimate, but it seems like it. Their neuromuscular growth is pretty considerable at this stage. Toddlers in preschools basically spend their time exploring their world around them and how their body moves. So they've got walking, running, jumping, playing catch at this point, even though the ball often hits them in the face because they have no coordination, they're trying. Physiologically, at this point, the toddlers, preschoolers have enough neuromuscular control over their body to have bladder control. This starts at about 12 months, give or take. It could be up to 15 months for it to start. However, that doesn't mean that they're ready for toilet training. It means they have the capacity to hold it. Doesn't mean they want to. So psychologically, they're not generally ready until 18 to 30 months. It's not just a physiologic thing where your body needs to work right, it's also a mental game. The average completion for toilet training is about 28 months of age, or 2.5. Boys tend to potty train later than girls. Girls tend to potty train pretty early. The biggest cause of death in this age range is going to be unintentional injuries or accidents. Kids are crazy at this age, running around. They seem to have very little fear because they don't understand the consequences of their actions. The other thing is when riding in a car, this is a huge transitional time. They go from that forward facing 5-point harness that's leaned back to seated upright. Then they go into a high backed booster, and then they go into a backless booster. And a lot of parents transition much faster than what the child is ready for. There is physical requirements to each of those. The safest way for a child to ride is actually in a rear-facing car seat. They can stay in that as long as they can up to the weight limit of their car seat, but a lot of parents turn them around. So this makes them very susceptible to injury during even mild car accidents. The other thing is that preschoolers figure out how the buckles work in the car, and so while mom or dad is driving, they like to unbuckle themselves so that they can move about the car and get the toy they dropped or just defy mom. Psychosocial changes. So preschoolers start learning how to speak well and express themselves. They learn that they have different emotions, and they can start to convey to you what it is that they're feeling. By 36 months of age, basic language is mastered. They start spouting off things that you wouldn't even understand. They start to interact and actually play games with other kids. Before that, they would play side by side, but they don't actually interact with each other. Toddlers tend to stand near somebody that's playing, but they won't actually hand things back and forth. They're very self-centered at that point. I mean, they might smack the kid next to them, but that's not because they're meaning to interact with them. It's more impulse than anything else. By 18 to 24 months, they understand cause and effect. That's why kids in that age group tend to throw their sippy cup off of their tray in their high chair because they have found out that when they throw it, it falls to the ground. And then mom's going to stop and pay attention because she's going to go over and pick up their sippy cup and give it back to them. So they do it to get attention sometimes. The other is just because they think it's cool that if they do something, this happens. They learn to recognize gender differences by observing those around them. So at this age, little girls tend to be more nurturing. They like to play with babies and Barbie dolls because they see mom doing certain things around the house, taking care of babies. And we do tend to push them in that direction as well. Little boys tend to be more rambunctious. They play with trucks and dinosaurs because we steer them that way, and then they watch other boys around them. They watch the people that they're growing up around, and if they like trucks, little boy's probably going to like trucks. School-age children is 6 to 12. Vital signs start approaching normal at that point for adults. Pulse rate's 70 to 120, your respiratory rate 15 to 20, blood pressure 80 to 110. There's huge physical trait change and body function change during this time. They grow approximately 4 pounds and 2.5 inches per year. Permanent teeth start coming in, so they're going to lose some of those baby teeth and start getting some of their permanent teeth. Brain activity increases in both hemispheres, so you can truly see how they have talents that emerge during this time. Excuse me, kids that have a knack for art and drawing tend to emerge during this time. Kids that are more athletic and love to play sports emerge at this time. Psychosocial changes, they have what's called preconventional reasoning. They act in order to either avoid a punishment or to get what they want. Then they transition into conventional reasoning. They look for approval from their peers, so peer pressure starts at this time. Then they transition up into post-conventional reasoning. They actually can be reasonable and think things through, and they're guided more so by their conscience than anything else. So they have a self-formed concept of right or wrong rather than following along with peer pressure. Now, it's definitely easier for them to go along with peer pressure. They're not necessarily as worried about punishment, manipulation, getting what they want. They'll still do that, but it's not going to be the greatest basis for how they make decisions. This is also when your self-concept and self-esteem start to really develop. Self-concept is just your own perception of yourself. How do you truly see yourself? Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself. And a lot of kids have problems kind of navigating this. It wasn't too long ago for you guys, so you maybe kind of remember how this felt of discovering yourself and who am I at this point, trying out different styles of fashion, different hairstyles, just to kind of find one that you felt like, yeah, this is kind of me. And this continues on, but this is where it really starts. This also is about how we fit in with our peers. We tend to start forming attached groups or cliques because we see people that have very similar ideals or very similar thoughts that we do. And so we'll try and flock to those people. We'll stop this one here and continue.